The species that chose mercy, Sub-Commander Vrak, adjusted the ceremonial cloak over his primary shoulder, the heavy weave of silk doing little to warm the cold knot twisting in his stomach. The airlock of the human cruiser Mercy's burden hissed open, unrolling a narrow, illuminated walkway toward the shuttle bay interior. There were no honor guards lined along the deck. There were no gleaming bayonets, no thunderous military anthems, and no ostentatious banners celebrating victory over the Third Valrakian Strike Armada. There was only a single human woman standing beside a high-top metal table, dressed in a plain navy blue service uniform, pouring hot tea into 2 porcelain mugs. Vrak stepped out, his boots clicking sharply against the polished deck. Behind him, through the massive reinforced viewports of the bay, lay the shattered remnants of his fleet. 300 capital warbarges drifted silently in the void surrounding the local star. None were exploding. None were venting atmosphere. Their hulls were completely intact, yet every reactor was dark, every weapon grid was disabled, and 300,000 Valrakian warriors were currently trapped inside their warm, pressurized hulls, completely incapable of moving a single meter. "Welcome aboard, Sub-Commander," Commander Elena Vance said, gesturing toward the table. "Please sit. The tea is a local peppermint blend calming for the nerves." Vrak did not sit. His 4 eyes narrowed, his mandibles twitching as he struggled to process the indignity of his position. "Where is your strike fleet?" Vrak demanded, his voice raspy from hours of frantic, useless shouting into dead comms arrays. "Where are the dreadnoughts that disabled my armada? I was sent to deliver our conditional terms of surrender to your commanding admiral." "You're looking at her," Elena replied softly, blowing gently across the surface of her cup. "And you're looking at the fleet. The Mercy's burden is an unescorted, solitary scientific cruiser." Vrak froze. "That is impossible. My armada possessed enough point defense energy to melt a continent. Your ship did not launch a single torpedo. You did not fire a single plasma lance. Yet in 40 seconds, 300 warbarges were rendered deaf, blind, and immobile." "We didn't fire weapons, Sub-Commander," Elena said, setting her cup down with a delicate click. "We transmitted a mathematical key." She tapped a control stud on the table, projecting a small, glowing holographic strand between them. "For 3 centuries," Elena explained smoothly, "your hegemony has built its military tech around the Kayla-Spatten quantum core, a beautifully efficient, highly reliable power matrix that you purchased from core world contractors. What your engineers never realized is that the core's magnetic containment field relies on a harmonic resonance frequency to prevent thermal runaways." Vrak's scales flushed a sickly, mottled gray. You knew our power architecture." "We didn't just know it. Our civilian universities designed the open-source mathematics for it 200 years ago," Elena said gently. "All we did 40 minutes ago was broadcast a low-frequency harmonic pulse that instructed your shipboard AI cores to safely shut down their reactors to prevent an artificial overload. Your automated safety protocols worked flawlessly. Your ships turned themselves off." Vrak stared at her, the horrific, humbling truth washing over him like ice water. The Third Armada hadn't been defeated by a superior war machine. They had been dismissed like unruly children by a species that understood their own tools better than they did. "You could have set the resonance frequency to overload," Vrak whispered, his mandibles trembling. "You could have detonated 300 quantum cores simultaneously. You could have vaporized our entire invasion force in a blinding flash of light." "We could have," Elena agreed quietly. "Why didn't you?" Vrak stepped closer, his voice laced with a desperate, agonizing confusion. "My high command ordered us to conquer your outer colonies. We came to put your people in chains. By all the laws of the void, you had the right to destroy us. Why choose mercy?" Commander Vance looked up, her dark eyes locking onto Vrak's four eyes with a calm, unshakable depth. Because power that requires slaughter to prove itself isn't power at all, Sub-Commander, Elena said, her voice dropping into a steady, absolute promise. Humanity spent thousands of years killing each other until we realized that real strength isn't measured by how many lives you can take. It's measured by how many lives you choose to spare when you have absolute control over the outcome. She picked up a small data slate from the table and pushed it toward him. This slate contains the override codes to restart your reactors, your engines, and your navigation systems, Elena continued. Your weapons will remain locked until you clear Terran space. Go back to your high command, Sub-Commander Vrak. Give them the slate and give them our answer. Vrak looked down at the slate, his clawed hand hovering above the glass in raw, profound reverence. "And what is your answer?" Vrak asked softly. Elena smiled, a warm, dignified expression that carried the terrifying weight of an empire that had outgrown the need for violence. "Tell them that humanity is always willing to negotiate," she whispered. "And tell them we sincerely hope they never force us to stop being merciful." Sub-Commander Vrak stood motionless, the weight of the glass slate cool and heavy in his palm. Through the wide viewports of the shuttle bay, the 300 silent, darkened hulls of his strike armada drifted against the cold background of distant stars, a monument to an invasion that had ended before a single drop of blood was spilled. "The fleet will be functional within the hour," Vrak asked, his voice barely rising above the low, soothing hum of the human cruiser's atmospheric scrubbers. "The moment you input the sequence into your flagship's primary comms array, the broadcast relay will ripple across your entire formation," Commander Vance replied, leaning back against the metal table with her arms casually crossed. "Your environmental systems haven't even dropped by 2 degrees. Your troops are warm, fed, and completely unharmed. They're just very, very quiet." Vrak slowly closed his clawed hand around the data slate. In his 2 centuries of service to the hegemony, victory was always defined by ash, conquest, and the systematic dismantling of enemy infrastructure. To be defeated so completely, and then handed the keys to one's own survival with a warm cup of tea, was a psychological blow far more devastating than any orbital bombardment. "My fleet master will not accept this," Vrak said quietly, looking down at the deck. His pride is built upon the blood of 30 conquered sectors. When his bridge consoles light up and he realizes a single human research vessel held his life in its hands, he will demand we re-engage. He will order a physical kinetic strike, unguided by shipboard AI. Elena didn't flinch. She simply picked up her porcelain cup and took another small sip. "Then he will discover why this ship is named Mercy's Burden," she said softly. Vrak's 4 eyes widened slightly. "What does that mean?" "Mercy isn't a lack of options, Sub-Commander. It's a choice we make every single second to keep our heavier systems offline," Elena explained, her voice carrying a calm, unyielding resonance. "If your fleet master orders a manual kinetic barrage, our automated point defense arrays will intercept every projectile before it crosses 3 kilometers. And then, my chief engineer will engage our second subspace, harmonic." She set her cup down, her gaze locking onto Vrak with a sharp, absolute clarity. "The second harmonic doesn't safely shut down quantum cores," Elena continued. "It permanently fuses their magnetic dampening coils into solid slag. Your ships won't explode, but they will never fly again. You will be floating in the dark, 500 light-years from home, waiting for human tugboats to come tow your armada into our scrap yards." Silence stretched across the shuttle bay, heavy and suffocating. Vrak felt a cold shiver run down his primary spine. Humanity hadn't just mastered defensive warfare, they had turned mercy into a tactical doctrine, a weaponized grace that left an enemy with no honorable way to die and no logical way to fight back. "You have thought through every variable," Vrak murmured, bowing his head in bitter recognition. "We had to," Elena replied gently, her tone softening once more into that warm, approachable cadence. "When you belong to a species capable of incredible violence, you spend a lot of time engineering safeguards so you never have to use it. I don't want to scrap your fleet, Vrak. I want you to take your people home." Vrak turned toward the open airlock ramp, his ceremonial cloak rustling in the soft breeze of the bay. He paused at the threshold, looking back one last time at the human commander standing alone beside her table. "In our archives," Vrak said, "we classified humanity as a soft, fragile culture because you built hospitals on your frontiers instead of fortresses." "A common mistake," Elena smiled softly. "People often confuse the choice not to fight with the inability to win." Vrak offered a deep, formal bow, not out of submission to a conqueror, but out of profound respect for a peer. "I will ensure the fleet master inputs the sequence, Commander," Vrak said quietly, "and I will personally ensure our ships set a vector far away from Terran space." "Safe travels, Sub-Commander," Elena said. "May your stars be quiet." 10 minutes later, the small Valrakian shuttle detached from the Mercy's burden, gliding back through the dark void toward the silent flagship. Inside the human cruiser's command deck, Elena watched the shuttle's tail flare fade into the distance before picking up her comms mic. "Chief Vance," Elena said into the console, "monitor their comms output. If they input the override code, grant them full reactor access and clear their vector. And if they charge manual kinetic batteries?" her chief engineer asked over the line. Elena looked out at the vast, silent armada floating in the dark, her expression calm, measured, and forever patient. "Then we offer them lesson number 2, Elena whispered. The shuttle carrying Sub-Commander Vrak docked silently within the hangar bay of the Devourer's crown, its magnetic seals locking with a faint, hydraulic hiss. Inside the central command bridge, Fleet Master Malaka stood before the darkened main holotank, his multi-jointed arms crossed over his chest, his scales trembling with a mixture of rage and profound humiliation. 300 captains were screaming over closed-loop intership comms, their voices a chaotic wall of panic as they found themselves trapped inside warm, breathing tombs with dead control panels. The heavy blast doors of the bridge hissed open. Sub-Commander Vrak walked in, his ceremonial cloak draped over his primary shoulder, his posture stiff and deliberate. "Vrak," Malaka bellowed, spinning around, his 4 eyes flashing a dangerous crimson. "Explain this. What dark sorcery has crippled the fleet? Why are our weapons locked while an unescorted human science vessel sits unbothered 3 kilometers off our port bow?" Vrak did not flinch. He walked straight to the central command console, reached into his tunic, and pulled out the small glass data slate handed to him by Commander Elena Vance. "It is not sorcery, Fleet Master," Vrak said, his voice entirely flat, devoid of the panic that usually governed Valrakian military discourse. "It is mathematics, and we have been utterly defeated." Malaka sneered, snatching the slate from Vrak's hand. "Defeated? By a single scientific cruiser? We have 300 warbarges. We have millions of tons of steel and plasma capacity. Input the override code immediately and prepare the kinetic batteries for a manual, unguided bombardment. If you input that code to arm the kinetic batteries instead of restoring standard navigation, Fleet Master, the second harmonic engages," Vrak said quietly, stepping back. Malaka paused, his claws hovering over the input grid. "What are you talking about?" "The human commander was very clear," Vrak replied, looking directly into Malaka's furious eyes. "The code on this slate can restart our reactors, our life support, and our sublight engines. It can send us home. But the moment we attempt to charge a manual kinetic weapon, their secondary subspace protocol fuses our quantum dampening coils into solid slag. We will not explode. We will simply drift in the dark, 500 light-years from home, waiting for human tugboats to tow us into their scrap yards. Bluff, Malaka roared, slamming his fist onto the console. It is a tactical bluff. A species that hides behind peaceful treaties and medical outposts does not possess the capacity to dismantle an entire armada without firing a single shot. Give me the master code. Before Vrak could warn him again, Malaka bypassed the safety restrictions and punched a manual override sequence into the terminal, attempting to force-charge the flagship's secondary kinetic railguns. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then, deep within the belly of the Devourer's crown, a low, structural hum began to vibrate through the deckplates, not the sound of an engine spooling up, but the agonizing, high-frequency whine of superheated magnets reaching absolute saturation. On the main tactical display, the status icon for the flagship's primary quantum core flickered from steady green to an angry, bleeding amber. "Fleet Master," the chief engineer screamed from across the bridge, his voice cracking in absolute terror. "The core dampening coils, they're welding themselves together. The magnetic containment is locking shut. We can't purge the reactor." "Cut power," Malaka shrieked, his arrogant composure instantly shattering into raw primal panic. "Cut the secondary grid, flush the coolant." "We can't," the engineer wept, pounding his fists against a dead console. "The human code intercepted our override. They've locked the circuit breakers from the outside. The core is sealing itself into a permanent, inert block." Across the fleet, the same catastrophic failure rippled through every single warbarge. 300 capital ships watched as their power grids flatlined, their massive weapon batteries dying with a pathetic, fading electrical spark, leaving them adrift in the dead silence of space, completely intact, completely safe, and completely, irrevocably helpless. On the bridge of the Devourer's crown, the emergency lighting flickered on, casting a dim, crimson glow over the terrified faces of the command crew. Malaka stood frozen, staring at his dead console. The silence was absolute, save for the hum of the emergency life support fans. Slowly, the main communications screen flickered to life. The calm, unhurried face of Commander Elena Vance appeared on the monitor. She was still sitting at her high-top metal table, holding her porcelain cup of peppermint tea. "We warned you, Sub-Commander Vrak," Elena said softly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent Valrakian bridge. "And we warned you, Fleet Master Malaka." Malaka trembled, his hands gripping the edge of the console as he looked up at the human officer, who had just disarmed an entire empire with a cup of tea and a mathematical formula. What do you want from us?" Malaka whispered, his pride completely erased. "Nothing," Elena replied with a warm, gentle smile. "Your life support is functioning. Your rations are stocked. Your crews are safe. We've already dispatched our commercial towing guild to pick up your fleet and escort you back past the Uit cloud." She took a slow sip of her tea, her dark eyes locking onto the broken Fleet Master. "Take your time, Fleet Master. Think of it as an extended scientific retreat, and next time you decide to visit human space, bring a book instead of a war fleet. You'll find it's much better for your health." The screen went black. Sub-Commander Vrak walked over to the edge of the silent bridge, looking out the massive viewport at the sea of dark, dead war barges drifting peacefully against the stars. He let out a long, slow breath, a strange sense of profound relief washing over him. The galaxy had just learned a very hard lesson. Humanity wasn't weak because they chose mercy. They were terrifying because they could afford to. The 3 weeks that followed were the quietest, most agonizing period in the history of the Hegemony Navy. 300 Valrakian warbarges, the pride of the Outer Rim, an armada built to conquer 5-star systems, were towed back across the border in a slow, neat, single-file line. They weren't hauled by ironclad battleships or intimidating destroyers, but by 40 small, yellow and black civilian tugboats belonging to the Terran Commercial Logistics Guild. On the bridge of the Devourer's Crown, Fleet Master Malaka sat in absolute silence, staring out the forward viewport. Every 10 minutes, a tiny human tugboat would pulse its sublight thrusters, gently nudging his 300,000-ton flagship through the void like a shepherd guiding a lost farm animal home. Sitting beside him on the command dais, Sub-Commander Vrak reviewed the telemetry logs on his handheld slate. "Our life support remains at 99% efficiency," Vrak reported softly. "The humans have beamed over 3,000 supply crates containing standard rations, medical supplies, and digital entertainment archives. They even included a polite note apologizing for the delay in transit speeds." Malaka's jaw clicked, his voice a dry, hollow rattle. "They are mocking us." "No, Fleet Master," Vrak said gently, turning to face his superior. "They aren't mocking us at all. That is the most terrifying part of this entire ordeal. To mock someone, you must view them as a rival. To the humans, we were simply a hazard on the road that needed to be moved out of the way before someone got hurt." As the parade of crippled warships crossed the border back into Valrakian territory, a massive fleet of 600 Hegemony reserve vessels dropped out of warp to meet them. Primary targeting arrays lit up across the entire reserve line, their captains preparing to engage whatever horrific human armada had captured their vanguard. Before a single weapon could be charged, the human lead tugboat broadcast a single wideband signal across all military channels. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a challenge, it was an invoice. "Terran Commercial Logistics to Valrakian Reserve Command," a cheerful, middle-aged human pilot announced over the comms. "We have completed the recovery and transport of your 300 vessels following their technical malfunction in Terran space. All personnel are healthy and accounted for. Towing fees and emergency roadside assistance have been billed directly to your diplomatic bureau. Please ensure your ships maintain sublight speeds until your core engineers can replace their fused dampeners. Have a wonderful day." The yellow tugboats detached their tow lines, executed a synchronized, elegant turn, and buzzed back toward human space, leaving 300 dark, unpowered warbarges floating harmlessly in the middle of their own fleet. In the days that followed, Fleet Master Malaka resigned his commission, retiring to a quiet mountain province on the Valrakian homeworld to spend the rest of his days studying human literature. Sub-Commander Vrak, however, was promoted to Chief Foreign Attaché to Terran space. 6 months later, Vrak found himself back aboard the Mercy's Burden, sitting at the exact same high-top metal table in the shuttle bay. Commander Elena Vance was there, dressed in her plain navy blue uniform, pouring 2 cups of hot tea. "Peppermint again?" Vrak asked, accepting the porcelain mug with a respectful nod of his mandibles. "Chamomile today," Elena smiled, taking a seat across from him. "A bit smoother on the finish. How is the Hegemony handling the treaty adjustments?" "Our High Council has permanently reclassified Terran space as a protected nature reserve," Vrak replied, taking a small, cautious sip. "Our warships give your borders a 10-light-year berth. Our military academies have removed planetary conquest from the primary curriculum and replaced it with advanced quantum mechanics." Elena chuckled softly, the sound warm and genuine. "A very sensible curriculum change." Vrak set his cup down, looking out the viewport at the peaceful, quiet void of human space. "Tell me, Commander," Vrak said quietly, "if another empire comes, one less reasonable than the Hegemony, one that refuses to accept your tea and your invoices, what happens then? Elena set her cup down beside his, her eyes calm, dark, and completely unbothered. Then we offer them chamomile, she whispered smoothly. And if they don't like chamomile, we show them why we keep the dark quiet. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest uploads.